Washington. Thank you for coming on the show.
What's up, my man? How you guys doing, man?
Yeah, I'm doing good, man. Thanks for coming on the show, man.
Oh, I'm glad to be here, bro. You know, it's always an opportunity to be wanted, be loved, you know, and being out there. So I appreciate you reaching out to me.
All right, man. First and foremost, where are you originally from? Where were you born?
Born and raised in South Central, man. I'm a product of Watts. I mean, you know, it's kind of like the people on the East Coast. They talk about Harlem, they talk about all those things back east, man. But you know, when it's out here, it's Watts and then it's Compton. So you know, most people glorify Compton, but when you live in Watts, you grow up and want to live in Compton. So that's where I'm from.
Okay. Growing up, role models who from growing up to inspire you in what you do.
Well, you know, it's like this, man. Most people would tell you like, oh man, I used to admire this dude, but when you grow up in the neighborhood, it's really about the dudes that you admire in your neighborhood. You know, it's the people that kind of pour into you. My high school coach, Henry Washington, not no relationship. You know, Joe McGill, who worked at the Park and Recreation and get you off the streets, and it kept me off the drugs. You know, he couldn't keep me out the street life, but he kept me off the drugs. Um, it was a lot of those type of people that I credit, my foundation. And then you start admiring other guys as you get older, as far as, athletes and things like that. I never really admired them, man. I kind of admired the dudes that was in the street that did some things to make sure guys like myself, stayed out the pen and stayed off the streets and kept on moving straight.
You got any white socks like this? You don't cut socks like this? White?
Football?
You don't think so?
Yeah, man. I actually was a baseball player. I was drafted to AAA, and but I had got into some trouble and lost that opportunity when I was 15. And so then football I didn't start playing football until 11th grade. It was I was a late bloomer, and ended up playing football. And this is when I met my mentor and my great friend, Henry Washington, who was my high school coach, who put his foot down and started putting me in the right direction, spending time with me, and getting me moving in the right direction. And but I ran track, I played basketball, I played baseball, played four sports, lettered in four sports in high school. Um, but I enjoyed the contact from football that became my love, and it was like you can take out your aggression. I had a real tough upbringing as a youngster, so it was the opportunity to let that stress out, and I can hit somebody as hard as I want and not go to jail. So I was starting to like that at the safety spot.
Right. So, UCLA and other schools that really instrumentally or your football career, but once you were in high school, were there other schools that are reaching out to you for scholarships other than UCLA?
Oh yeah, yeah, man. When I hit the scene, I hit the scene with power because my high school, Jordan High School was it was on the map. It was there, but I took it to another level when I came. So I hit it on fire. Like, I think I had like 9 interceptions, 20 touchdowns my first year ever playing football, and all the West Coast teams, the whole pack. It's called Pac-12 now, but the Pac-10 was loving me. Oklahoma, Miami, all the schools that had a little swag. They was after a young buck at that time, and it was a good feeling. But I had no intention on going to college. I mean, that, like I told you, man, I kind of admired the streets. And at my time when I was coming out in the '80s, that's when the money was real good, and I almost got caught up in that. Um, but because, like I said, because of my high school coach, he really got me going in the right direction, doing the right things, and saved my entire life.
Okay. So UCLA, you turned down because you wanted to coach, right? At that time.
Yeah.
Yeah. What forced you to passing away from about who you thought the coach was?
So like Terry Donahue, man, it was kind of cool because a lot of dudes. He was a little gangster in the sense of how he did his recruiting. I was, recruited. It was expected to go to probably Arizona State or Washington at this time, and I had these home visits, and and like I say, nobody ever went to college in my family, so it was a little tough to try to make a decision. But we had the home visits back then. You only had like 5 visits, and the head coaches from Arizona State and Washington was supposed to come meet my grandma, and and my grandmother don't know. I had my grandfather's sixth grade, sixth grade education, grandma third grade education. So all they was trying to figure out who's paying for college. And so the day that I was supposed to make my decision, Coach Terry Donahue found out, and he actually bumped all the coaches that was there to visit, and kind of came in there and and wooed my grandmother. And that's actually how I ended up at UCLA. But you know, and he kept every promise that he had made to my grandmother, as far as like getting your education, making sure that he was going to make sure that I was good, as far as the living and making sure. I mean, he was a guy who not only became, like, again, I've been very fortunate. He was a good coach for me at the time, but he became a great friend towards the end of my career. Uh, may he rest in peace. But he has impacted a lot of young dudes that he came to the neighborhood to get, and change their lives.
Okay, so fast forward to your freshman year. I want to talk about against the bowl. They say you tried against the bowl against Miami. You went against obviously your future coach Jimmy Johnson. You was co MVP of that game. Won your squad won 39-37. So about that game.
Well, yeah, the MVP of the game, but how Miami was back in the day. I think they had
Yeah,
just came off a national championship
yeah,
the year before, and but they always used to call the dudes out west a little soft. But we had never lost to any team that came from that particular side of town, uh, and it was so funny because we ended up beating Miami, and I ended up having some lifelong friends that I'm still kind of cool with at this day because of that particular game. Melvin Bratton, Benny Blades, and Baines, and all them dudes that actually played during that time um, was amazing. But to actually end up playing for Jimmy Johnson was kind of funny because um, I thought that I was going to go to the Raiders during this time. I thought that you know, I was going to go play for the Raiders. I've always wanted to play for the Raiders when I was in the game. Lester Hayes, a dude that I kind of admired back in the day. So I wanted to be a Raider. Um, and when I went to visit, Jimmy talked about the Fiesta Bowl. He talked about all the things and how he wanted type of players with a different type of attitude. Obviously, having me, Charles Haley, you know, he's used to having guys that had the edge, and he knew how to coach guys who had the edge, and he allowed us to be ourselves, but he knew how to ring us in, but not put his thumb on our neck and make us feel small. So I have to say that he is probably one of the best coaches that I've ever had on and off the field.
okay. Fast forward to your senior year. You had a 10-2 record. Talk about that season. That was a great season in Florida, 2016. Talk about that season, your senior year, going 10-2.
Oh yeah, that's another connect. Emmitt Smith, that he was a young buck at that time, um, and they had a real good team, a quality team that we ended up beating my senior year. I think it was in Hawaii, and just like I said, it was so funny because back then you the the those teams were just dominant until they came out and played the teams that was on the West Coast. And because of the time difference, a lot of people didn't get to see West Coast teams that often, and they didn't realize how tough our defense was. Um, and it was a defensive battle that particular day, you know, and young Emmett Smith was scrambling around, and but they just couldn't quite get over the mighty Bruins at that time, you know, throwing interceptions. But Emmett did his thing, but they needed a little bit more help. They needed a little bit more help on defense.
Okay, so now let's fast forward to the draft. You know, the NBA draft. Unfortunately, you fell fifth round onto you said you had tore your knee ligament in junior senior year. That's the reason why you dropped. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, well, it was actually I wasn't expected to get drafted. I went to the combine and got a zero on my in my physical, and they told me that I was not, I was projected in many years. I had led the Bruins in tackles, interceptions, went to two Rose Bowls, Fiesta Bowl, and all the things that you're supposed to do to build a great resume. At that time, safeties was breeding out of UCLA. Um, but I ended up tearing my posterior medial lateral ligament and didn't do well at the combine. So I had failed in the draft, and I watched all these dudes get drafted before me. Um, it was a tough day, draft day. I wasn't even expected to go. Matter of fact, I was about to go to the movies because I was frustrated because I watched. I'm not gonna call them bums, but I was watching all these dudes that I knew that you know couldn't touch my jock at the time get drafted before me, and I had told my ex-wife at the time, my ex-wife, um, hey, guess what? I don't think I'm getting drafted. So I had already had a plan because to move forward in life. The next thing you know, the phone rang. The Los Angeles Rams said they're gonna take me in the fifth round, and all I really wanted, man, was opportunity. I figured I'd get an opportunity. I know I could prove myself, and once I got that opportunity, we made it home and we made it real. Ended up playing 8 years. Out of those 8 years, I was in the NFL. I was in the NFL for 8 years. Playoffs, 6 of those 8 years. NFC Championship 4 of those 8 years. As a starter. So we had a good run at it.
Yeah, you ended up Los Angeles Rams. So you played in in LA, out west in California. So that was like for a rookie, they didn't expect you to be drafted. You still went to a team that talk about that because you're playing in your home state in that area. Talk about that.
Yeah, well, it was kind of cool to have that experience, graduate. Matter of fact, I didn't even have to move from the city that I was living in. I actually drove from where I went to college. I just drove like right down the street. Next thing you know, I was employed, for 2 years in Los Angeles. And at the time, the Rams were pretty decent. We wasn't Super Bowl. We was contenders. We was growing into be contenders. We lost the NFC Championship to San Francisco in '88, but we didn't have enough to get over the hump. And and that was the first year of free agency. It was called Plan B that was coming up. Um, so it was exciting to be home, but it was it, you had to go somewhere else to understand what real football was about. Um, Playing in Los Angeles is great, but there's so much that goes on in Los Angeles, and the focus. You got Hollywood, you got Dodgers, you got Angels, you got Lakers, and at that time, so there was a lot going on. So to be a big powerhouse and put all the attention, it was a little tough in Los Angeles. But it was a great thing for me, great experience for me because I didn't have to leave home. But I think the best thing that ever happened to me was Plan B and playing free agent.
I want to get into the second year. Yeah, that year you played San Francisco in the playoff run. You went up against Philadelphia. You won that game against Randall Cunningham. Big name, big quarterback, big time quarterback, rightfully so. Ryan can throw it. Talk about that win against Philadelphia.
Well, I mean, you look at Philadelphia, man. I mean, Philadelphia was always competitive. They always had what it take or what it took to be successful. Um, but I would always say they just didn't have enough. They had key players that can make plays, but they didn't have no game changers that can break plays. And that I think that was the difference. When you go into different cities and you say, man, as cold as Randall Cunningham was, he needed some support in a
2:45, right?
variety of
3 o'clock
ways.
appointment.
They had some superstars, but it's all right to have superstars, but back then your roster had to be deep. Your first team, your second team, and even your third team. And then sometimes, a lot of people don't take in consideration like what is the big difference. You know, you got football is three phases. It's offense, defense, and special teams. And those are the things that I think kind of you would find the cheek in their armor would be in maybe defense. Randall Cunningham doing his thing, but when it really counted, he was trying to do it all by himself. And unfortunately, when you win in championships, man, it's a team effort.
Okay, so now the next game we went to the old Giants Stadium. We played against the Giants. That's known as the Flipper Anderson game in overtime. Talk about that
Yeah,
game,
you
man.
set that record.
Yeah,
Yeah, actually, Willie Flipper Anderson was my roommate in college at UCLA
yeah,
freshman year. Yeah, that was my dude, and he went bananas that particular day. Him and Jim Everett had a record-setting day, um, and then he just ran out the tunnel. We ran out with him, man. Ended up winning that particular game to get to the NFC Championship that go.
yeah, yeah. He went against the defending champ. Yeah, Simpson 49ers. It was 33 versus 28. Your experience. Talk about that experience for yourself versus playing in this championship game, only in your second year.
But to be able, I've always been part of winning programs, so the expectation to win was never doubt. It was just a matter of um, how do we get there, and I felt that team, like you say, every team needs a piece, and our piece at that point in time, I think, was the quarterback. I think we had a solid defense. I think we had quality receivers. I just think that at that time, Jim Everett, who's a great guy, he just didn't have that killer instinct in the nerves that you need to sit in that pocket and make them throws, especially with that beast San Francisco and one of my favorite players, Ronnie Lott, doing his thing and constructing that quality defense. I think a lot of people don't take in consideration when championships are won is usually how well your defense played during championship time. And San Francisco outplayed us that particular day. Um, we were the better team, but they were the veteran team that actually outplayed us that particular.
Okay, so now you go on the second year. Now you're a Cowboy. Talk about that feeling being a Dallas Cowboys, a team, franchise that Jimmy Johnson obviously was his second year. You haven't wasn't there yet, but you was part of the building process. Talk about being a Dallas Cowboy in 1990.
Man, being a Dallas Cowboy, like I just told you, coming from Los Angeles, you think that would be big, man. But to be a Cowboy for 5 years, and let's just talk about it at the beginning, man. To walk in, because I'm not knowing, like you say, I came from college, went to UCLA, so then, my next step was still in Los Angeles, and I've been born and raised in Los Angeles. So at this point, I had never really left for a long period of time, nowhere. Um, and, but I remember being in the hotel in the off season, and I had worked out for the um, for the Cowboys, and it was like in the off season, and they had high school football all over the TV, and this is in the off season. So I was like, man, this is crazy how they get behind their football. Can you imagine how big that was to be behind in the Dallas Cowboys in Texas? and they had not even won. I think they went like 1-15, and I was telling my agent, "Oh man, I don't want to go there." I had went and reworked out, ran a 4.4 for the Raiders, so I thought I was going to be free agency was up. I thought I was going to the Raiders, and always wanted to play for the Raiders, and but um, me and my wife had went on a trip. We went to the Bahamas or something. But when you go through the Bahamas, my flight landed in Dallas. The connecting flight to get back to LA. So back then, we didn't have cell phones and stuff. So I was out of touch with what was going on because I thought, you know, after I did all my workouts, I was going to be a Raider when I got back home. So I get to Dallas, man, and they take me off my flight. Um, Dallas Cowboys was with American Airlines, and they somehow got me off my flight, and I was upset because I was trying to figure out like why my ticket is already paid for, and lo and behold, man, management comes and picks me and my wife up from the stadium, I mean from the airport, and take me over to the Dallas facilities because I'm not knowing what was going on at the time, man. So it was crazy to go through that experience because I'm thinking I'm gonna be a Raider, and next thing you know, I'm sitting in front of Jimmy Johnson talking about, um, I think we got something to do here. And the first thing that he said to me when we sat down, and you got to understand, I was in the NFC Championship the year before. The next thing that he had said to me was, "Hey, I think you're one of the pieces that can get us back to the Super Bowl." And I was just in the NFC Championship, so I know how hard it is to even get to the playoffs. And they was 1-15. I'm like, and I didn't want to laugh in his face, but I was like, man, you know. But he was dead serious. He had made it real clear. He said in 2 years we'll be playing for a Super Bowl. Lo and behold, 2 years later, I'm playing in the Super Bowl at the Rose Bowl. 2 years later. I mean, so he foresaw that, and he put the team together to make it happen. So he had a plan, and he orchestrated that plan, and I was glad just to be part of that.
Okay, so your first year with us, you went 7-1 season, 91 season, 8 wins, 14. Talk about that, getting off to that great start against Bill Belichick. Wasn't Bill Belichick to the Patriots.
And he was still tight. He wasn't the veteran that he was. But I think once we got that in that '90s season, where I think in when my first year there, you could see that it was coming. We just needed a couple pieces that could get it over the top. I mean, our defense was fire, you know, and we were still developing. We just needed a few more components. Um, we got some offensive linemen in there to get some things done. You know, we got a lot of second tier guys that could actually impact. And that's what I told you earlier. One thing that I learned about football through Jimmy was it was all about being able to win in all three phases. If you win in all three phases, you win in the football game. But what Jimmy used to teach and he used to preach on a constant, we got to win two of the three phases. And see, he never took special teams lightly. Special teams, most of the starters and defensive starters, they was playing special teams as well. So it was he used it in in a capacity that was another possession, may it be turnovers, field position, and Jimmy played all phases of the game, and that was the turnaround from '90 to '91. Is that we learned to play young guys too, learned to play practice that every day.
Go Washington Redskins. The Monday night game, that was a shootout, 33-31. Talk about that game. Fortunately, we lost that game, but that was great football game. Interception ran for long, I think like 77 yards. Spin it around and ran all the way for a touchdown. But talk about that game.
Well, you can see because the Redskins had actually won the championship, I think, the year before.
That year
Um,
they won, 91.
that year they won it. So it was it. Let me just say this: the NFC East in the '90s
Yeah,
was dominant.
yeah,
I mean, it was going to be a team from the NFC East, and that's kind of like again, Cunningham got caught in a storm because it was you had Washington Redskins, you had the Giants at that time, you had the Dallas Cowboys. It was, I mean, every year we had three or four teams deep in, going deep in the playoffs. So, and we had to knock each other off to get to the NFC Championship. So, um, it's just like you have a big brother and you're trying to play him in hoop, you know, and you just every day when you're the younger brother, you're just trying to figure out how to beat that big brother. And then you can finally tell that you can compete. You probably didn't win, and I'm talking about this Washington game because they was the champion, and they were the talk of the town. The Giants were the talk of the town. So Dallas Cowboys was still at the bottom of the totem pole at that time, and all of a sudden now the games are competitive. Now the games they're not blowouts. And now you have that confidence. Yeah, we should have beat these cats, you know, a play here, a play there. Now your confidence is totally different. And if you pour that into young players, like it was, we was the youngest team at the time. If you pour that into young cats, man, sky is the limit. And you saw you have the young blood going at it, and then also you spray some Jeff Coates and some Bill Bates and some other guys that have that veteran experience that they hadn't won, but they had that veteran experience. And if one thing about our team is that we play for each other, and I'm talking about in Dallas. A lot of times, a lot of people like you think it's a cliche, but we really played to impress each other. We didn't really care about the coaches. Our coaches was cool. They understood what they was working with. But if we lost the game, coaches didn't have to tell us on the plane what happened. Guys on offense, defense, we already critiquing ourselves on the flight home or, you know, at the club, wherever we